Okay, what we're looking at here is an oil shock on the left rear of the race car. Now, if you look right here, is 0 on the horizontal axis and 0 on the y-axis. And as we move to the right on this horizontal axis, look down here. We're moving up in speed, 1 inch per second, 2 inch per second, 3 inch per second. This is the speed at which the shock is either opening or closing. All right. As we move up or down on the vertical axis, we're looking at the poundage it takes to open or close that shock. Above here is the poundage it takes to close the shock, to push the shock in, and below here the number of pounds it takes to pull the shock apart. So if we look at right here, we see at 1 inch per second on this line, it takes 50 pounds to pull the shock apart. All right. Now, the graph we've always looked at traditionally is this starting at 0, is this graph here, coming up like this, all the way up to the top, up to here. And then at 0, that's the compression side, it's back at 0, coming down like this on the rebound side. Okay? So we would look at these two lines, this line and this line. Okay? Everybody in the world looked at those two lines. Well, now we're finding the lines we want to look at are these lines. This line coming up here and this line coming down here. The first two lines I showed you, this one and this one, are the shock speeding up. These lines here and here, the shock slowing down. And what you want to look at here is at the 0 on this vertical 0 axis, which is no speed at all before you actually push it or pull it out. The slowing down portion already shows a approximately 60-pound resistance, whereas the speeding up shows a 0-pound resistance. Now this shock we're looking at is an example of an oil shock which doesn't keep a car left, because if you look, it only has 60 pounds of rebound resistance. Okay. Now I'm going to open another shock up. Here is a gas shock. Here's our 0 line. Here's our speeding up graph here on the compression side. Here's our speeding up graph, speed here on the rebound side. Here's our slowing down graph. Look at the rate. Look at the rebound amount it takes at 0 on the 0 axis. You're looking at 25 pounds here. Okay. So this car has a lot more rebound at a slowing down rate. Now, we never looked at this graph before, but this graph, for whatever reason, is what's holding the car down. It's what NASCAR looks at. Okay. Their rates are from 400 pounds on up because they're running, cars that are 2 and 3 times heavier than our car. But this is the difference. This is a gas shock showing 320 pounds. This is an oil shock showing 60 pounds. Okay? And that difference is the difference between keeping a wing sprint car left after you lose your wing speed due to air, or you get into traffic where there's a turbulence and you don't have clean air pushing that wing left. You need a shock to hold you left. Well, as you can see, the oil shock, if you go by this graph, is not going to do it, and the gas shock is going to do it. So that is what the state of the art is right now. And like I say, the confusion is none of us looked at this slowing down portion of the graph. We all looked at the speeding up portion of the graph. The reason was that we thought, well, as you enter a mode, as you start to push the shock in, it's going to meet its max resistance, because pushing in, when you first start to push it in, the oil in the shock has to push open all the valves that get the oil through it. And when you start to pull the shock apart, it likewise has to open up all the valves on the rebound side to allow the shock to pull apart. Whereas as you start to, once they're open and you slow down and begin the reverse direction, well, how can that possibly do anything? Well, whatever reason, we're wrong. The slowing down portion that we want. So this is what the Outlaws are looking at, and Casey Kane. And a lot of this came from Casey Kane and the bleed over from NASCAR world. Okay, so now at this point, you know what I know. and hopefully this year we can we can do better with a little bit more knowledge we have.